Hey everyone, thanks for your patience. I'm finally getting this mosaic grouting video done. It's been a hectic few weeks, pivoting the business into different directions. So today we're going to do the grouting for that last week of the mosaics. I've just done the one video for both classes. I think I'll be able to explain it pretty well because we both did different projects. One we did the terracotta half pot, and the other one we did a paver where we used ceramic mesh, a different technique, but I'll be able to explain the grouting pretty easily in the one video. So I'm going to be grouting the street number that I was working on. I finally got it finished yesterday. Some of it is already grouted. Those green bits are grouted, the flowery bits are grouted, but other bits aren't grouted. So I'm just going to grout the whole thing. So before you start, give yourself a couple of hours because your grout only has a few hours shelf life before it will start to set. So you want to get it done preferably in the one session. So set yourself aside a couple of hours. You'll need to have the grout that I supplied you, the isoelastic that I supplied you in a little container, some water, because we're going to mix the isoelastic 50-50 with the water, and then we're going to mix that with the grout, and that will provide the grout with flexibility for outdoor applications. It'll allow the grout to move with the heat, cold, wet, dry, etc, etc. So that's what that is for. You will also need an old spatula-y thing, whatever you've got lying around, to mix your grout. This is still dirty, but if you were to clean this straight away, it would clean up fine. If you leave it, it sets. So clean as you go if you want to keep everything nice and clean. And then we need something to spread our grout. Now this is just an old cut up ice cream lid, because it's nice and flexible. So I find them good for spreading the grout. So that's what I use. And if you're doing the paver, you'll want one of these little guys or something similar that's got a tooth in it, because we're going to be putting a whole layer of grout onto your paver first and spreading it with this so that we create this tooth, which is the similar thing to do when you do wall tiles and things like that. You create a tooth for the tile to stick to. So it doesn't have to be one of these. They're pretty cheap at Bunnings, but just, you know, a fork, you know, just something to create a tooth, to drag through the grout to create a tooth. So it can be, you know, things that you've got at home. And then we just want a bit of a sponge to do some cleaning up, and an old cloth to do a final wipe over at the end. So I think that that is everything that we need. So what I'm going to do first is mix up my grout, and we're going to mix it to a icing kind of consistency. So I've got my grout just in an old ice cream container that, as you can see, has been used before for grout. And I don't want to put too much moisture in first, because if it's too wet, it won't be usable and you'll need to add more grout, which you don't have. You can come back here and get some, but so just to add the liquid to it gradually, a mix gradual, till you get a consistency that's like icing. So I've got a little measuring container here because I want 50-50 water and grout. So I'm just going to start water and isoelastic. So I'm going to start with 50 of water. So I've measured 50 of water, and now I'm going to fill it up to the 100 mark with isoelastic, and then I've got a half measurement. So I'll just do that down here on the table because it's a bit heavy and awkward and all that stuff, but there you go, you can kind of see it. So if you go slightly over or under, you know, it's not the end of the world, it's okay. All right. So I've now got 100. So I'm going to just give that a bit of a mix together with the other end of my thing that I'm going to use to mix it. Got an old cloth over here. Right. Now I'm just going to gradually mix that to my... I'm going to gradually mix that. My phone's ringing. Sorry if that's come up on your screen. I'm going to let it go to message bank. Anyway, so we've got that grout. Now I'm going to just gradually mix some. Just gradually mix it around, add some more, gradually mix it. Make sure you get all around the sides, like what you do when you're mixing a cake or a batter. You want to get all the ingredients in. A little bit more. Give it a good mix. Now that's pretty well mixed, and the consistency that I want is kind of thick icing. You don't want it running off, but you don't want it to be completely stuck on there either. So that's pretty good consistency. Now, theoretically, we have to let this sit for a few minutes and then we start to spread it. So while it's doing that, I'll explain the difference between the two projects that we're doing. So the people with pavers, you were given a bit more grout because you need to put a layer of grout about 1 centimetre thick. So where that would be. Onto your paver, spread it all out evenly across the whole thing, and then do this little scoring in it. And then you're going to take your finished piece of mesh, which you've got all your tiles stuck onto, you've peeled away your Glad wrap, you've peeled away your paper, you're just left with mesh and tiles, and you're going to sit that on top of that piece of grouted paver, and you're going to push it down nice and evenly so the grout squidges up through the holes and through the spaces in your tiles. So just you squish that down so it's nice and even. Just pat it down. You don't want it to be, so you're going to make it nice and even. So it's just kind of like eyeballing it. You can be technical and get a level if you like, but or a ruler and the whole thing. But yeah, just get it nice and even. And then once you've done that, then we can move on to the next step, which is what I'm going to be doing and which the terracotta pot people are going to be doing, which is just grouting then over the top of it and finishing off our edges. So when we're grouting, I'll just explain all this while we're waiting for the grout to set. We're going to be going backwards and forwards in lots of different directions so we can get it into all the nooks and crannies in between all the tiles. And then with the edges, if you remember, we left, you know, 1/2 to 1 centimetre of an edge all the way around, and that's so that we could finish off our edges with the grout. So you can see there that I've done one edge, but up here I haven't. Down here I haven't. So you can see the difference there. And that's going to hold out that little line of grout, which is on an angle. So I've done it like that, so that it's on an angle, so it's not like that, it's like that. And that's going to hold our ceramic in place longer over time while it's in the garden or wherever you've got it. So that is what we're going to do. And then once we've got it all spread, it's going to be on top of our tiles. We're going to be using the sponge to clean it up as much as possible, and then we're going to give it a final cleaning up with the cloth. So I'll put this back down. I'll pretend that this is sat for a few minutes, and I'll give it another mix. Now, as I said before, some of mine's already grouted, so I'll be missing those bits that I've already grouted, and I'll just be putting on the bits that aren't grouted. But for you at home, you haven't grouted any of yours yet, you can just splodge it in like in, splodge it in kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4 bits, and then start spreading it with the spreader. But I won't be doing that because I've already done some. So I'm going to put the camera back down now onto actually what I'm doing. So I'm just going to reposition this. Now, I think you can see. All right, so I'll start doing this. So I'm just going to get, and I'm just going to, so I haven't done this little bit here yet, this white and blue bit I haven't done. I haven't done that white, blue, grey. I haven't done that side bit, and I also haven't done all my edges, haven't done this blue bit. So I'm just kind of putting it on the bits that I haven't done yet. But for you, you can just put it everywhere. All right, so I'm going to start spreading. Still got a little bit more in my container in case I need it. Let's move that out the way. So I think that you can see it all. So I'm just going to go backwards and forwards, and I'm holding it from down here, not up here. You've got more control if you're holding it down closer to the edge of the actual scraper. I'm going to go backwards and forwards in different directions, just to make sure that I get it into all those nooks and crannies. So you can see how I'm moving it around. It's also not going to hurt your fingers. It's not toxic. So if you feel like you need to get into a little bit of it here and there just to get it right into some tight little corners that won't quite fill properly, you can use your fingers. It's not going to hurt you. Whoop, there's a tile. I'll just pop that there. I'll find where it went later, I guess. So if that happens and one of your tiles pops off, just put it to one side, and then when you clean it up, you'll probably see the hole where it came from, and you can just, because the grout will still be wet, you can just squidge it back in. So don't panic if that happens. Now I didn't stick all these down because they were a bit awkward, so I forgot about that actually. But so I'm just going to have to hold them in place a little bit as I grout, which is fine, it's just a little bit more awkward. So you kind of see the gist of what I'm doing. So that this is not boring and looking like paint drying, maybe I'll just turn the camera off, get it all spread out, and then come back and show you how we're going to do the edges. So but you can kind of see how that's all coming in together there. It's looking good. So I'll press pause and come back in just a moment. Okay, so we're back. So I've pretty much spread it out over the entire piece, and now I'm going to just remove the excess and do my edges. Now you can use the scraper to remove your excess. I'm going to get in there with my fingers because I find that easier. You can also use latex gloves or silicone gloves if you want to at this point, but yeah, the grout's not going to hurt you. and yeah, I'm just like to use my hands. So I'm going to do it this way, but you can do it with the scraper or with gloves. So I'll just put the camera back down towards the mosaic again. So hopefully you can see that I've kind of pretty much got it all spread. Now it looks a bit of a mess, of course. So the idea is now that we're going to scrape away a lot of this excess. And I'm just putting it back into my container. I'll put it here so I don't have to reach across. Now I'm going to turn this around because I haven't done the edge down here. So you can see I haven't done the edge here. So to do that, as I'm moving this grout around and removing the excess, I'm going to put it down here. And just use it to start filling those edges. I had a couple of loose tiles because I had a lot of texture in here, like these ones here were quite wobbly, because I like to put a lot of texture into the work, and sometimes that means that the tiles aren't sitting flat, so sometimes they can be a little bit hard to stick, which is not a drama, it just makes it a bit more fiddly. So you can see how I'm kind of filling up those edges, and I've got more excess grout in my container which I used before, which I was putting back into the container before as I was cleaning off the excess earlier. So I've got more little bits on the edge of my ice cream container that I mixed my grout in. Put him back in. Now, if I want to get more for my edges, which I do, I've got more in my container. So I'm just going to pick some up on my finger, and I'm just going to take it along the edge. But as I said, you can use your spatula for this as well. I'm going to get it in underneath that tile because it's kind of raised up a bit, but as I said, that's because I like that texture in the pieces. So I have to make sure that I just get it in under that tile as well. And I think with the terracotta ones, I think a couple of you had your edges come out from over the edge of your cement sheeting, which means that you want to be doing what I'm doing now. You also want to be doing from behind, so you'll be turning your piece upside down and doing this, but the other way around, from behind, so that you're grouting those pieces in from underneath, basically. Alright, so I think I've got all my edges. I'll just run my eye around that. Okay, I'm just going to tidy this one up a little bit. Okay, so my edges are all pretty much done as well. So, oops, so I'm going to put that back down, and I'm now going to go over it with a dry sponge. I don't want to introduce too much water into it at this point because I don't want to saturate the grout, which can cause cracking as it dries. So we don't want that. So just dry my hands. I've got some water here. So I've got a dry sponge, and I'm just going to start to clean that away from the tiles. So you can kind of already see the difference there. Once it starts to clean up, if you've got uneven level of tiles, it's at this point that you might find yourself digging a few out that have been buried in the grout if you use different thicknesses because you wanted that visual variation. So it's at this point you'll be uncovering those, like Christmas, finding new things, finding tiles you forgot you had. Now, as you can see, my sponge is getting quite dirty. So even though I said before that we want to use a dry sponge because we don't want to get the grout too wet, you are going to have to give it a rinse to clean it up. And then in doing that, if you've got another dry sponge at home, grab that. If not, make sure that you rinse it out and give it a really, really, really huge tight squeeze. So that's what I'm doing. I'm rinsing it out. And I make sure that I really, really squeeze it out a lot, like a lot. I basically don't want any moisture left in there. But as I say, if you've got another dry sponge at home, go for it. So we'll keep going now with that really, really well squeezed out sponge. Getting into all the nooks and crannies. There's one that just moved. It's okay. Once the grout dries, the grout will hold that in, and I'm going to put a little bit more on that edge where it came out, just to be on the safe side. I'll do that last. And I can also, in the process of that, see a little gap in there that didn't quite get enough grout. So I'll put that in there as well. So you can do little touch-ups as you go, if you need to. So you kind of get the gist of this. So I won't video the whole lot of me doing this because it's like before, a bit like watching paint dry. I'll finish doing it and then we'll come back to see the final cleaned up piece and talk about what we need to do next. Okay, so we're back. I've cleaned back most of the tiles and now we're just going to give them one final little going over, which I'll show you now. So I'll just put the camera back down. So you can see it's looking pretty clean. Now with those edges too, what I did with those was with my squeezed out sponge, I basically just went around and just patted those edges in, just to give them a smoothness. That's all you need to do for those edges. And just go all the way around and just tidy them up and make them nice and smooth. Okay, cool. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go give it a final going over with just an old cloth, finger in it, and I'm just going to go over and just clean each individual tile. So again, I won't keep the video going for the whole of this because, you know, it's a bit boring. If you have any little stubborn bits, you can get your nail in there. If you've got really stubborn bits, what I use, and you can still use this like say tomorrow, or the next day after you've done it, if you noticed a bit that was a bit of grout that shouldn't be there but it's gone a little bit hard. Now I use one of these, I sell them in the shop, but you could use, you know, the edge of a knife or something. You don't want to scratch your tile, but it's just enough just to kind of just scrape any little bits off that you don't want, that it might have gone a little bit hard by tomorrow. It's also good for, you'll see that these blue tiles up here, haven't cleaned them up super duper much. These were the really textured ones and all different funny shapes, so a couple of them are a bit loose. So I've just cleaned up as much as possible. And then these also had holes in them, these tiles. You'll see that. There's a hole. These are all holes that are filled with grout. So tomorrow, or maybe even later on tonight, when they've dried out a little bit, I'm going to go around with my tool and just clean up those holes with the tool. So yeah, old knife, Stanley knife, nail, or as I say, I've got these in the shop. So that is the final step, just doing those final cleaning up bits. Now, even after we've done this cleaning up that we're doing now, tomorrow or the next day when it's fully dry, you will still find that it will have dried with a bit of a dusty residue on it, which is just like, it looks like a little coating of like powder, which is because, you know, the grout is a powdered thing in its original form. All you do to get rid of that is give it a buff over with a soft cloth, so an old t-shirt, old pair of undies, and just give it that final buff over, and that'll clean it up, and then it will be ready for installation, whatever you want to do with it. So if anyone has any trouble following this video, or if you have got any questions, by all means send me a text or an email or a Facebook message, and I'll clarify anything that wasn't explained properly or didn't quite make sense or what have you. So that's all fine. And the next project, if anyone's interested, is a mosaic sphere. That information's on the website and Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But when I send you the link to this, I'll also put the link to that in there as well, just in case anyone's interested. It'll be an online class, but it will be live streamed so that you'll have the opportunity to ask questions during it. But having said that, I'll also be recording it so that if you can't make the live stream, you'll be able to catch up by watching the recording and then email questions if you've got any questions like today. There's another couple of bonuses also with doing the online class, which is all explained in the listing on the website. So check that out if you're interested. There's a Facebook group that everyone will get exclusive membership of, where we're going to put in additional projects and stuff like that. Hints and tips and stuff. So, yeah, I'll send all that information in the email that has got this link to access this final tutorial. So sorry it was a bit long in the tooth, but there's just been so much going on, as I'm sure there has been with you. Okay, so I'll go now, and yeah, I'd like to see some images of your finished pieces. If you want to send them through to me, that'd be good. Okay, all right, see you in cyberspace. Bye.